My once best friend's face went pale as she stared at me, then at the man whose arm was wrapped around my waist. "Hello, Sarah," I said, my voice steady as ice. "You remember my husband, don't you? The CEO of Morrison Industries, your boss." Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The color drained from her perfectly made-up face, and I could see her hands trembling as she tried to process what she was seeing. I had waited 5 years for this moment. 5 long years of planning and building my way to the top. And now, watching Sarah's world crumble in real time, I felt the sweetest satisfaction I'd ever known. If you are watching this, please hit that like button, subscribe, and mention in the comments where you are watching this from. I would like to know how far my story has reached. Exactly 5 years ago, the morning of what should have been my wedding day, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. My stomach dropped even before I read the first one. "Emma, I'm so sorry. You need to know the truth. Emma, please call me back. Anna, they're gone. Both of them." I stumbled out of bed, my white silk robe catching on the doorframe as I rushed to my phone. The messages were from my sister, my mother, my bridesmaids, all saying the same thing in different ways. David was gone, and so was Sarah, my maid of honor, my best friend since college. The woman I trusted with every secret, every insecurity, every dream. She'd helped me pick out my dress. She'd thrown my bachelorette party. She'd held my hair back when I threw up from wedding nerves just 3 days ago. And she'd stolen my fiancé the night before our wedding. The note David left was brief and brutal. "I'm sorry, Emma. I can't go through with this. Sarah and we've fallen in love. I never meant for it to happen, but I can't marry you feeling this way about someone else." 200 guests, a $20,000 reception, a dress that cost more than my car. All of it destroyed by 2 people I'd trusted more than anyone in the world. They'd been planning this for months, which I only found out later, through a mutual friend who couldn't keep quiet anymore. Sarah and David had been having an affair for 6 months. 6 months of secret meetings, stolen kisses, and elaborate lies. While I was tasting cakes and picking flowers, my best friend was stealing my future. The humiliation was unbearable. Everyone knew. Everyone pitied me. Poor Emma, left at the altar by her cheating fiancé and backstabbing best friend. The story spread through our social circle like wildfire, and I became the girl who couldn't keep her man. I disappeared for a while after that. Took a leave of absence from my job at the marketing firm, moved back in with my parents, and tried to piece my life back together. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's face. Her fake smile when she helped me with wedding planning. The way she hugged me and told me how happy she was for me. All while planning to destroy my life. That's when I decided that pity wasn't enough. Humiliation wasn't enough. I wanted revenge. I locked myself in my childhood bedroom for 3 days after that, refusing to see anyone, refusing to eat, refusing to acknowledge the mountain of wedding gifts that needed to be returned, or the honeymoon reservations that needed to be canceled. On the 4th day, my mother forced her way in. "Emma, sweetheart," she said, sitting on the edge of my bed and stroking my unwashed hair. "I know this hurts. I know it feels like the end of the world. But you're going to survive this." "How?" I asked, my voice hoarse from crying. "How am I supposed to survive this? Everyone knows. Everyone is talking about it. I can't show my face anywhere without people whispering about poor Emma who got dumped at the altar." "You're stronger than you think," she said firmly. "And someday, this will just be a story about how you dodged a bullet. David wasn't worthy of you. And Sarah, well, she showed her true colors. But I didn't want to dodge bullets. I didn't want to be grateful for narrow escapes. I wanted David and Sarah to hurt the way I was hurting. I wanted them to understand what they'd taken from me." That's when the idea first started forming in my mind. Not a plan yet, just a seed of something dark and determined. They thought they'd won. They thought they could ride off into the sunset with their stolen love story, while I faded into the background as a cautionary tale. They were wrong. The funeral for my old life was elaborate and thorough. I returned every wedding gift personally, wrote thank you notes to every guest explaining that the wedding had been canceled, and donated my wedding dress to a charity that provided gowns for women who couldn't afford them. With each task, I felt myself changing. The naive, trusting woman who had believed in fairy tale endings was dying, and someone harder was taking her place. By the time I finished closing the chapter on my ruined wedding, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I wanted to destroy them. I spent months learning everything I could about David's new life with Sarah. Social media made it easy. They weren't even trying to hide their relationship anymore. Photos of romantic dinners, weekend getaways, Sarah wearing the diamond earrings that David had given me for my birthday the year before. But more importantly, I learned about David's career. He'd always been ambitious, but in a lazy way. He wanted success without working for it, recognition without earning it. After college, he'd bounced between jobs, always looking for the next big opportunity that would make him rich and famous overnight. When we were together, I'd been his biggest supporter. I helped him write cover letters, practiced interview questions with him, even used my own connections to get him meetings with potential employers. I believed in him more than he believed in himself. Now I was going to use that knowledge against him. David had landed a job at Morrison Industries 6 months after leaving me. It was a mid-level position in their marketing department, nothing special, but it was a foot in the door at one of the most prestigious companies in the city. I knew he'd want to climb that ladder as fast as possible. I also knew he'd cut corners to do it. Morrison Industries was run by a CEO named Marcus Morrison, the grandson of the company's founder. He was young, brilliant, and according to every business magazine in the country, single and intensely focused on his work. The company had tripled in value under his leadership, and he was known for his innovative strategies and ruthless business practices. Perfect. I enrolled in an MBA program at the university where Marcus had gotten his degree. I studied the same professors, took similar classes, and made sure to excel in all of them. I learned everything I could about business strategy, corporate leadership, and most importantly, how to make myself indispensable to powerful men. It took me 2 years to graduate, 2 years of 16-hour days, and endless networking events. But when I walked across that stage with my MBA, summa cum laude, I had a plan, and Marcus Morrison was going to help me execute it, whether he knew it or not. Getting hired at Morrison Industries wasn't easy, but I prepared for every possible obstacle. The application process alone was grueling. Multiple rounds of interviews, psychological assessments, case studies, and presentations to panels of senior executives. Most candidates were eliminated in the first round, but I'd spent 2 years preparing for exactly this moment. My resume was perfect. Not a single gap or weakness that couldn't be explained and turned into a strength. My references were impeccable, carefully cultivated relationships with professors and industry professionals who could speak to my character and abilities. My interview skills had been honed through countless practice sessions and mock interviews, but it was my research into the company's strategic challenges that really set me apart from other candidates. I applied for a position in the strategic planning department, 3 levels above where David was still stuck in marketing. My MBA, combined with the glowing recommendations I'd carefully cultivated, got me an interview with the department head. That interview led to a case study presentation to the executive team, and that presentation led to a final interview with Marcus himself. I prepared for that moment for months, studying every aspect of Morrison Industries' business model, their competitors, their market position, and their growth opportunities. When Marcus asked me to identify the biggest strategic challenge facing the company, I didn't hesitate. Brand differentiation in an increasingly commoditized market, I said confidently. Morrison Industries has built its reputation on quality and reliability, but so have your 3 main competitors. The question isn't whether you can continue to deliver excellent products and services. It's whether you can make customers care about the difference. Marcus leaned forward in his chair, his steel gray eyes focused intently on my face. And how would you address that challenge? I launched into the presentation I'd been perfecting for weeks, outlining a comprehensive strategy for repositioning Morrison Industries as not just a quality provider, but as an innovation leader. I talked about emerging market opportunities, strategic partnerships, and the importance of corporate culture in driving competitive advantage. When I finished, Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need more of around here," he said finally. "Most people see strategy as a series of financial models and market analyses. But you understand that business is fundamentally about people, understanding what they want, what they fear, and what motivates them to act. People are predictable," I said, meeting his gaze steadily. "Once you understand their patterns, you can influence their decisions." Something flickered in his eyes at that comment, a recognition that we were talking about more than just business strategy. He hired me on the spot. Working for Marcus was like being thrown into the deep end of an Olympic pool. He demanded perfection, pushed boundaries, and expected his team to anticipate his needs before he voiced them. Most people found him intimidating. I found him fascinating. The strategic planning department was small but influential, responsible for analyzing market trends, identifying growth opportunities, and advising the executive team on major business decisions. It was exactly the kind of high-visibility role I needed to gain access to information about all departments, including marketing. My first week was a trial by fire. Marcus assigned me to analyze a potential acquisition target, giving me just 3 days to produce a comprehensive report that would inform a multi-million-dollar decision. Most new hires would have been overwhelmed, but I'd been preparing for this level of challenge for 2 years. I worked 18-hour days, diving deep into financial statements, market analyses, and competitive intelligence. I interviewed industry experts, analyzed consumer trends, and built financial models that painted a clear picture of the acquisition target's true value. When I presented my findings to the executive team, I could see Marcus watching me carefully, evaluating not just my analysis, but my presentation skills, my ability to handle challenging questions, and my confidence under pressure. "Your recommendation?" he asked when I finished. "Pass," I said without hesitation. "The numbers look good on the surface, but they're built on unsustainable market conditions. The target company has been riding a temporary wave of demand that's already starting to decline. We'd be buying at the peak of their value cycle." The room was quiet for a moment. This was a deal that the CEO had been personally interested in pursuing, and I was essentially telling him he was wrong. "Explain," Marcus said simply. I walked them through my analysis, showing how the target company's recent growth was driven by factors beyond their control, and how their core business model was vulnerable to shifts that were already beginning to happen in the marketplace. 3 months later, the company we'd almost acquired filed for bankruptcy. Marcus called me into his office. "How did you know?" he asked, not bothering with pleasantries. "Pattern recognition," I said. "Every industry goes through cycles, and most companies get caught up in short-term thinking. They mistake temporary success for permanent strength." He nodded slowly. "That's exactly the kind of insight that separates good strategists from great ones. Most people see what's happening now. You see what's coming next." From that moment on, Marcus began treating me less like a new employee and more like a trusted advisor. He started including me in higher-level strategic discussions, asking for my input on decisions that were far above my official pay grade. He was nothing like David. Where David was charming but shallow, Marcus was intense and complex. Where David looked for shortcuts, Marcus was willing to work 18-hour days to get things right. Where David made promises he couldn't keep, Marcus delivered on every single commitment. And unlike David, Marcus noticed my work. Within 6 months, I was leading projects that people with 5 years more experience couldn't handle. Within a year, I was attending board meetings and contributing to major strategic decisions. Marcus began asking for my input on everything from marketing campaigns to merger opportunities. I was becoming indispensable. But more than that, I was becoming something I'd never expected. Genuinely successful in my own right. During this time, I kept careful track of David's progress, or lack thereof. While I was rising rapidly through the ranks of strategic planning, he remained stuck in his mid-level marketing role. increasingly frustrated by his inability to advance. I learned from office gossip that David had been complaining to his colleagues about being overlooked for promotions, claiming that his ideas weren't being given proper consideration by senior management. It was classic David, always someone else's fault when things didn't go his way. What David didn't know was that I was quietly influencing those decisions. Nothing obvious or traceable, just strategic input about the marketing department's performance and potential. A word here, a suggestion there, always delivered in the context of broader strategic discussions. The marketing team seems to lack strategic vision, I mentioned to Marcus during one of our regular review meetings. They're executing tactics without understanding the bigger picture. What would you recommend? Marcus asked, always interested in my perspective. Maybe some cross-departmental collaboration? Strategic planning could work with marketing to ensure their campaigns align with our long-term objectives. It was a perfectly reasonable suggestion that had the added benefit of giving me direct oversight of David's work. I was now in a position to evaluate his performance, identify his weaknesses, and ensure that his mistakes didn't go unnoticed. The revenge plot was working better than I'd ever imagined, but it was also changing me. I wasn't the heartbroken girl who'd been left at the altar anymore. I was becoming a force to be reckoned with. And Marcus was starting to notice me as more than just an employee. The late nights were becoming a pattern. Marcus and I would be the last ones in the office, poring over financial reports or strategic plans until well past midnight. What had started as necessary overtime had evolved into something more intimate. Long conversations that ranged far beyond work topics. We talked about books, travel, childhood memories, dreams for the future. I learned that Marcus had grown up feeling the weight of family expectations, that he sometimes wondered if he was building his own legacy or just maintaining someone else's. He learned that I was driven by a need to prove myself, to never again be in a position where someone else could control my fate. What I didn't tell him was how much of my drive was fueled by revenge. During one of these late-night sessions, Marcus opened up about his personal life in a way that surprised me. "Do you ever wonder if success is worth the sacrifice?" he asked, leaning back in his chair and loosening his tie. "What do you mean?" "I'm 32 years old, and I spend more time in this office than I do anywhere else. I have acquaintances, not friends. I date occasionally, but nothing serious, because I can't give anyone the attention they deserve. Sometimes I wonder if I'm building an empire, but missing out on having a life." I looked at him carefully, recognizing the vulnerability behind his words. This was Marcus without his CEO armor, just a man questioning whether he'd made the right choices. "Success without fulfillment isn't really success at all," I said quietly. "But maybe the problem isn't that you work too much. Maybe it's that you haven't found the right person to share it with." Something shifted in the air between us. The conversation had crossed a line from professional to personal, and we both knew it. "What about you?" he asked. "Ever been close to settling down?" This was the moment I'd been dreading and preparing for simultaneously. The truth was too complicated, too dark, but I couldn't lie outright without risking everything I built. "I was engaged once," I said carefully. "It didn't work out. He wasn't who I thought he was." "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and I could hear the genuine sympathy in his voice. "That must have been devastating." "It was," I admitted, "but it taught me something important about myself. I'm stronger than I thought, and I don't need someone else to complete me. I need someone who complements me." Marcus studied my face in the dim light of his office, and I could see him processing this new information about me. He was trying to reconcile the confident, successful woman he worked with every day with the person who'd been hurt badly enough to guard her heart so carefully. "Whoever he was," Marcus said finally, "he was an idiot." I smiled at that. The first genuine smile I'd felt in months. "Thank you. I mean it," he continued. "Any man who who couldn't see your worth doesn't deserve a second thought. If only he knew that David hadn't just failed to see my worth, he'd actively betrayed it in the most humiliating way possible. I told myself it was just part of the plan. Getting close to the CEO was strategic. It would give me access to information about David's department, opportunities to sabotage his career from the inside. But somewhere along the way, something real began to develop between us. Marcus was different when it was just the two of us. The hard edges softened, and I got glimpses of the man behind the ruthless business facade. He was funny in an understated way, fiercely loyal to the people he cared about, and surprisingly vulnerable when he talked about the pressure of living up to his family's legacy. Sometimes I wonder if I'm building on their foundation or just living in their shadow, he told me one night, leaning back in his chair and rubbing his tired eyes. You're not your grandfather, I said, surprising myself with the honesty in my voice. What you've built here is yours. The company might have his name, but the vision is all you. He looked at me then with an expression I couldn't quite read. Something shifted between us in that moment. A recognition that we'd crossed a line from professional to personal. The kiss happened 3 days later. We were working late again, celebrating the successful completion of a major acquisition deal I'd helped negotiate. Marcus had ordered champagne for the team, but by the time we finished up, everyone else had gone home. It was just us, 2 empty champagne glasses, and the city lights twinkling through his office windows. I couldn't have done this without you, he said, and there was something in his voice that made me look up from the documents I was organizing. He was standing closer than usual, close enough that I could smell his cologne and see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. When he reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, I didn't pull away. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like he was asking a question. When I kissed him back, it became something deeper, more urgent, something that made me forget, for just a moment, why I was really there. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against mine. This is complicated, he said. Yes, I agreed, but I didn't step away. I don't want to lose you as an employee. You won't, I promised, and I meant it, even though I wasn't sure anymore which version of myself was making that promise. That night changed everything, not just between Marcus and me, but in how I saw my own plan for revenge. What had started as a calculated scheme to get close to David's boss was becoming something real, something I hadn't expected or prepared for. I was falling in love with Marcus Morrison, and that terrified me more than anything Sarah or David had ever done to me. After that night, I began plotting for David's downfall, and it began with a lie on his resume. It was a small thing, really. He'd claimed to have a certification he'd never actually earned, a detail that most employers wouldn't bother to verify. But Marcus ran a tight ship, and when I casually mentioned that I'd noticed some discrepancies in employee credentials during a routine audit, he ordered a comprehensive review of all personnel files. David's lie was discovered within a week. I hate dishonesty, Marcus told me as we reviewed the report together in his office. If someone will lie about their qualifications, what else will they lie about? Maybe it was just an honest mistake, I suggested, playing devil's advocate while secretly savoring every word. Marcus shook his head. This kind of mistake doesn't happen by accident. He deliberately misrepresented his background to get ahead. That's not the kind of person I want representing Morrison Industries. David was fired the following Monday. I made sure to be in the elevator when security escorted him out of the building. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the humiliation of being walked out in front of his colleagues. When his eyes met mine, I saw a flicker of recognition, then confusion. Emma, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Hello, David, I replied, my tone professionally neutral. How are you here? I work here, I said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The elevator doors opened on the ground floor, and security guided him toward the exit. But he kept looking back at me, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was starting to understand that this wasn't a coincidence. That was the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment when David realized that I wasn't just some broken-hearted ex-fiancé who'd faded into obscurity. I was someone with power now. Someone who could affect his life the way he'd affected mine. But it was only the beginning. Over the next few months, I used my connections and inside knowledge to make sure David had trouble finding new employment. A word here, a reference check there. Nothing traceable back to me, but enough to keep him unemployed and desperate. Sarah, meanwhile, was struggling too. Without David's steady income, she couldn't afford the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. I watched through social media as she sold her designer handbags, moved to a smaller apartment, and started picking up freelance work to make ends meet. They were starting to understand what consequences felt like, but I still wasn't satisfied. Ruining David's career was gratifying, but it wasn't enough. I wanted them to feel the same level of betrayal and humiliation they put me through. I wanted them to understand what it was like to have their entire world turned upside down by someone they trusted. I wanted them to know what it felt like to lose everything. A few days later, we were in Marcus's office, working late as usual, when he suddenly closed his laptop and turned to face me with an expression I'd never seen before. Nervous, but determined. "Emma," he said, and something in his tone made me set down my pen and give him my full attention. "I've been thinking about this for months, and I know the timing isn't perfect, but I can't wait any longer." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. "I love you. I love your intelligence, your drive, your honesty. I love the way you challenge me to be better. I love the way you make me laugh when I take myself too seriously." My heart stopped. This wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't supposed to happen. But as I looked into his eyes, saw the vulnerability and hope there, I realized something that terrified me. I loved him too. Somewhere along the way, between the late nights and shared dreams and quiet conversations, I'd fallen completely and irrevocably in love with Marcus Morrison. "I know we said we'd keep this professional," he continued, opening the box to reveal the most beautiful ring I'd ever seen. "But I can't pretend anymore that what we have is just a workplace relationship. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." I stared at the ring, my mind racing. Accepting would mean committing to a future I'd never planned for, with a man I'd originally intended to use for revenge. It would mean choosing love over vengeance, forgiveness over justice, but it would also mean getting everything I'd really wanted all along. A partner who valued me, respected me, and loved me for who I truly was. "Yes," I whispered, and when Marcus slipped the ring onto my finger, it felt like coming home. We were married 3 months later, in a small ceremony with just our immediate families and closest friends. It was everything my first wedding would have been if David hadn't destroyed it. Intimate, meaningful, and filled with genuine love and joy. But even as I said my vows to Marcus, part of me was thinking about Sarah and David. They were still out there, still living their lives, still unaware of how thoroughly I'd dismantled David's career prospects. They'd moved in together, gotten engaged themselves, and were planning their own wedding. I could have let it go then. I had everything I wanted: a successful career, a man who adored me, and a future full of possibilities. The revenge plot had served its purpose, bringing me to exactly where I was supposed to be. But then I got the invitation. It arrived at my office on a Tuesday afternoon, addressed to Emma Palmer, my maiden name. Inside was a wedding invitation for Sarah and David, scheduled for exactly 5 years, to the day after they'd destroyed my first wedding. The message was clear. They hadn't forgotten about me, and they wanted me to know they were celebrating their triumph. That's when I decided that my revenge wasn't complete after all. Planning the final phase required patience and precision. Sarah had started working at Morrison Industries. It wasn't a coincidence. Through my network of contacts, I'd learned that she'd been struggling to find steady employment ever since David lost his job. She'd been doing freelance graphic design work, barely making ends meet. When a position opened up in our marketing department, I made sure she got the job. It was easy enough to do. I had influence in the hiring process, and Sarah's portfolio was actually quite good. All I had to do was make sure her application got the right attention and that the interview process went smoothly. The irony was delicious. Sarah had no idea she was now working for the wife of the man whose career she'd helped destroy. She knew Emma Palmer worked at Morrison Industries. Our employee directory was public, but she had no idea that Emma Palmer was now Emma Morrison, or that Emma Morrison had any connection to her past. I watched her during her first week, saw how she tried to keep her head down and avoid drawing attention to herself. She was scared, I could tell. Scared of being recognized, scared of the gossip that might follow if people connected her to the wedding scandal from 5 years ago. But she was also hopeful. This job represented stability, a chance to rebuild her life with David. They could finally afford to get married, maybe even start a family. It was almost sad how much she trusted that everything would work out. I let her settle in for a month before I made my first move. Nothing dramatic, just a casual mention to Marcus that we'd hired someone with an interesting background in the marketing department. Really? He asked, barely looking up from his morning emails. Sarah Chen. Used to run in the same social circles as my ex-fiancé, actually. Small world. Marcus's attention sharpened. He knew the story of what David and Sarah had done to me, though I'd been careful to present it as ancient history that no longer bothered me. That's quite a coincidence, he said carefully. I thought so too, but she seems nice enough. Very talented. I'm sure it'll be fine. I could see him processing this information, trying to decide if it was something he needed to worry about. In the end, he decided to trust my judgment, which was exactly what I'd been counting on. Over the next few weeks, I made sure Sarah's work was highly visible to upper management. I recommended her for high-profile projects, praised her contributions in meetings, and generally positioned her as a rising star in the company. Sarah began to relax. She started smiling more, contributing more actively in meetings, even making friends with some of her coworkers. She thought she was finally getting her life back on track. She had no idea she was being set up for the biggest fall of her life. After a few days, Sarah presented the proposal to the executive team of a gala night, a celebration of Morrison Industries' record-breaking year, complete with awards, entertainment, and all the pomp and circumstance that would impress our clients and shareholders. Marcus loved the concept and gave it his full backing. Sarah was put in charge of organizing the entire event, the biggest responsibility she'd been given since joining the company. She threw herself into the planning with enthusiasm that was painful to watch. This was her chance to prove herself, to show that she belonged in the corporate world, to build something she could be proud of. The night of the gala came. The ballroom looked magnificent. Sarah had outdone herself with the decorations. Crystal chandeliers casting rainbow light across white marble floors. Elegant floral arrangements on every table, and a stunning backdrop that showcased Morrison Industries' logo in gold and silver. She stood near the entrance, greeting guests with a smile that radiated pure joy and satisfaction. She was wearing a stunning navy blue dress that I recognized as a rental from the most expensive formal wear boutique in the city. Even struggling financially, she'd wanted to look perfect for her big night. I watched her for a while from across the room, feeling a complex mixture of admiration and anticipation. She'd done brilliant work organizing this event, and under different circumstances, I might have genuinely respected her for it. I wanted it to be the kind of night that Sarah would remember forever, the pinnacle of her professional achievement right before I destroyed it all. The guest list was impressive. Clients, competitors, industry leaders, and journalists. Everyone who mattered in our business world would be there to see Morrison Industries at its finest, and they would all be there to witness Sarah's humiliation. I've been planning this moment for months, waiting for the perfect opportunity to reveal the truth about Sarah and David's betrayal, not just to them, but to everyone who mattered in their professional and social lives. The weapon I'd chosen was as elegant as it was devastating: the truth. David had been unemployed for over a year now, blacklisted from every major company in the city through my careful manipulation of his reputation. But he'd been lying to Sarah about it, pretending he still had prospects, still had hope of rebuilding his career. What Sarah didn't know was that David had been borrowing money from loan sharks to maintain the illusion of financial stability, dangerous people who weren't known for their patience with late payments. What David didn't know was that his debts had been quietly purchased by a subsidiary of Morrison Industries. Technically, we now owned David. And at the gala, in front of everyone who mattered, I was going to call in that debt. The night of the gala came. The ballroom looked magnificent. Sarah had outdone herself with the decorations. Crystal chandeliers casting rainbow light across white marble floors, elegant floral arrangements on every table, and a stunning backdrop that showcased Morrison Industries' logo in gold and silver. She stood near the entrance, greeting guests with a smile that radiated pure joy and satisfaction. She was wearing a stunning navy blue dress that I recognized as a rental from the most expensive formal wear boutique in the city. Even struggling financially, she'd wanted to look perfect for her big night. I watched her for a while from across the room, feeling a complex mixture of admiration and anticipation. She'd done brilliant work organizing this event, and under different circumstances, I might have genuinely respected her for it. Marcus appeared at my side, devastatingly handsome in his tailored tuxedo. He'd been mingling with clients and investors, but now his attention was focused entirely on me. "You look incredible," he murmured, his hands settling at the small of my back. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a stunning red dress that was both elegant and commanding, paired with the diamond necklace Marcus had given me for our 6-month anniversary. I looked like exactly what I was, the wife of the most powerful man in the room. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked, and I could hear the concern in his voice. He knew what tonight was really about. I'd told him everything the week before. The revenge plot, the manipulation, the careful orchestration of Sarah and David's downfall. I'd expected him to be angry, to feel betrayed by my deception. Instead, he'd been fascinated. "You've been planning this for 5 years?" he'd asked, a note of awe in his voice. "Not this specifically," I'd admitted, "but some version of it, yes." He'd been quiet for a long moment, processing the revelation that the woman he'd married was capable of such elaborate, long-term vengeance. "Do you regret it?" he'd finally asked. "Any of it?" I'd thought about that carefully before answering. I regret that I needed to do it at all, but I don't regret protecting myself or making sure they faced consequences for what they did. "And us?" he'd asked. "Do you regret how we started?" That was the hardest question to answer, because the truth was complicated. I'd started working at Morrison Industries for revenge, but somewhere along the way, it had become so much more than that. "I regret the deception," I'd said finally, "but I don't regret finding you." Now, standing in the ballroom, Sarah had so carefully prepared. Marcus squeezed my hand reassuringly. David entered the ballroom, and he looked terrible. The past year of unemployment and mounting debt had taken its toll. His suit was cheap and ill-fitting, his face gaunt with stress, his eyes darting nervously around the room as if he expected trouble. He was right to be nervous. Sarah rushed over to him immediately, her face lighting up with relief. They'd clearly argued about him coming tonight. She'd probably worried he'd say something inappropriate or embarrassing in front of her new colleagues. She had no idea how right she was. I waited until they'd made their way to the bar, until Sarah had relaxed enough to start introducing David to her coworkers. Then I made my move. "Marcus," I said, loud enough for the people around us to hear, "there's someone I'd like you to meet." We walked across the ballroom, every step deliberate and measured. I could see heads turning as people noticed the CEO and his wife, a approaching the marketing department's corner of the room. "Sarah," I said warmly, "what a wonderful event you've put together. You should be very proud." "Thank you so much, Mrs. Morrison," she replied, her cheeks flushing with pleasure at the praise. "That means everything coming from you." "And you must be David," Marcus said, extending his hand to my former fiancé. David's face had gone completely white. He was staring at me with an expression of dawning horror, finally understanding what he was seeing. "You remember David, don't you, darling?" I asked Marcus, my voice carrying just far enough for the nearby guests to hear. "He's the one I told you about." The confusion on Sarah's face was almost comical. She looked back and forth between us, trying to understand the undercurrents of the conversation. "I'm sorry," she said hesitantly. "I don't understand. Do you guys know each other?" "Oh yes," I said, my smile never wavering. "David and I were engaged once, until he ran off with my best friend the night before our wedding." The glass slipped from Sarah's fingers. The sound of crystal shattering against marble was like a gunshot in the sudden silence that had fallen over our corner of the room. People were starting to stare, drawn by the obvious drama unfolding before them. "That's impossible," Sarah whispered, but I could see the truth dawning in her eyes. "You're Emma Palmer. You work here. You're not. You can't be." "Emma Morrison, actually," I corrected gently. "I got married last year. To Marcus, as you can see." Sarah's legs seemed to give out, and she grabbed onto David's arm for support. He was still staring at me, like he'd seen a ghost, his mouth opening and closing without sound. "Hello, Sarah," I continued, my voice warm and conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. "It's been such a long time. How are you enjoying working at my husband's company?" "Emma," David finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. "What are you doing here?" "I work here," I said simply. "I have for 3 years now. In fact, I'm the one who recommended Sarah for her position. I thought she deserved the opportunity." Sarah made a sound that was part sob, part gasp of understanding. She was beginning to see the shape of what I'd done, the careful orchestration that had led to this moment, but she still didn't know the worst of it. Marcus stepped forward, his expression gravely serious as he addressed David directly. "Mr. Patterson," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I believe you and I need to have a conversation about your outstanding debts." David went even paler, if that was possible. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled to a document. "According to my records, you owe approximately $47,000 to various creditors, debts that were recently acquired by Morrison Industries." The room had gone completely silent now. Even the waitstaff had stopped serving drinks, drawn by the electric tension of the confrontation. "That's not possible," David stammered. "I'm afraid it is," Marcus continued, his tone professionally neutral, despite the devastating nature of his words. "Which means, legally speaking, you now work for me. Or rather, you owe me a considerable sum of money that I doubt you're in a position to repay." Sarah was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she realized the full scope of what was happening. Her perfect evening, her moment of professional triumph, was collapsing around her in the most public way possible. "Why?" she whispered, looking at me with something that might have been genuine confusion. "Why would you do that?" I looked at her for a long moment, this woman who had once been my closest friend, who had shared my secrets and supported my dreams, before destroying them completely. "Because," I said quietly, "some betrayals require consequences." What happened next was swift and brutal. Security escorted David from the building while Sarah watched, her career at Morrison Industries effectively over before the evening was through. The video of the confrontation went viral within hours, turning their private shame into public humiliation. The business community is smaller than people think, especially at the executive level. By morning, everyone who mattered in the industry knew the story of the woman who'd spent 5 years planning the perfect revenge against her cheating ex-fiancé and former best friend. Some people called it brilliant. Others called it psychotic. I called it justice. Sarah resigned the following Monday, unable to face the whispers and stares of her colleagues. David defaulted on his debts and filed for bankruptcy, his name now poison in professional circles throughout the city. They broke up 3 months later. Apparently, the stress of unemployment, financial ruin, and public humiliation isn't great for a relationship built on betrayal. Who could have seen that coming? Do you ever regret it? Marcus asks me sometimes. Usually late at night when we're alone in our penthouse apartment, the city lights twinkling below us. It's been 6 months since the gala, and our lives have only gotten better. Marcus's company continues to thrive. My own career has reached heights I never imagined possible, and our marriage has grown stronger through the shared knowledge of what I'm truly capable of. Do you? I ask him back, because I know he was just as invested in the final act as I was. He considers this seriously the way he considers all important questions. I think, he says finally, that some people mistake revenge for justice. But what you did, that was justice. I think he's right. Sarah and David made a choice 5 years ago to destroy my life for their own happiness. They gambled that I would quietly disappear, that I would accept their betrayal as the natural order of things. They gambled wrong. I built myself into someone they couldn't ignore, someone with the power to affect their lives the way they'd affected mine. I gave them exactly what they gave me: public humiliation, broken dreams, and the knowledge that someone they'd trusted had been working against them all along. The only difference is, they deserved it. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if they'd chosen differently that night 5 years ago. If David had come to me honestly about his feelings, if Sarah had stepped back instead of pursuing a relationship with my fiancé, we might have all ended up happy in some different configuration. But they didn't choose differently. They chose betrayal, deception, and cruelty. So I chose revenge. And unlike their choices, mine actually worked out exactly as planned. 6 months later, a wedding invitation was delivered to my office by courier. For a moment, my heart stops, thinking it might be from Sarah or David, some final attempt at reconciliation or revenge of their own. But when I open the envelope, I find something much better. It's from my sister. She's getting married in the spring, and she wants me to be her maid of honor. The irony isn't lost on me. 5 years ago, I was the abandoned bride, humiliated and broken. Now I'm successful, powerful, happily married, and trusted enough to stand beside another bride on her most important day. My sister knows the whole story, of course. She was there in the aftermath of my ruined wedding, holding me while I cried and helping me pick up the pieces. She watched me disappear into my revenge plot, worried about what I was becoming, but never trying to stop me. "I'm proud of you," she told me when I called to accept her invitation. "Not just for what you accomplished, but for how you did it. You could have destroyed yourself with bitterness, but instead, you built something beautiful." I think about calling Sarah to tell her just to twist the knife a little deeper, but then I realize something that surprises me. I don't need to. The revenge is complete. Sarah and David are both working minimum wage jobs in different cities now. Their reputations destroyed, their relationship over, their dreams of success permanently shattered. They wake up every morning knowing that their own choices led to their downfall, that the woman they'd dismissed and discarded had rebuilt herself into someone capable of destroying them. That knowledge will follow them for the rest of their lives. And I get to wake up every morning next to a man who loves and respects me, in a career that fulfills me, with a future full of possibilities they'll never have. Last week, Marcus and I started house hunting. We're looking for something with a big backyard, room for children someday, space for the family we want to build together. It's a future that 5 years ago seemed impossible, but now feels inevitable. Do you ever think about what would have happened if David hadn't left you? Marcus asked me as we walked through a beautiful colonial in the suburbs. I considered the question seriously. Sometimes, I admitted. but I think I know what would have happened. I would have married someone who didn't truly value me, spent years trying to be enough for someone who was fundamentally selfish, and missed out on finding someone who actually sees me. So, in a way, he did you a favor, Marcus said, wrapping his arms around me from behind as we looked out at the garden where our future children might play someday. The biggest favor anyone's ever done me, I agreed. He forced me to become the person I was meant to be. Some people might call what I did excessive. They might say that 5 years of planning and manipulation was too much, that the punishment didn't fit the crime. But those people have never been betrayed by their best friend and fiancé the night before their wedding. They've never felt the particular agony of discovering that the two people you trusted most in the world were laughing behind your back while they planned to destroy your happiness. They don't understand that some wounds require surgery, not bandages. And they definitely don't understand the sweet, perfect satisfaction of watching your enemies' faces when they realize they've lost everything. I frame my sister's wedding invitation and hang it on my office wall, right next to my MBA diploma and the photo from my wedding day with Marcus. A reminder of how far I've come, how much I've built, and how thoroughly I've won. The best part is that my victory isn't just about destroying Sarah and David. It's about everything I built in the process. A successful career, a loving marriage, genuine happiness, and the unshakable knowledge that I'm strong enough to survive anything. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just getting even. Sometimes the best revenge is getting everything. Let me know which city you are watching this from and if you liked my story, so that I can keep bringing more stories like this to you. Thank you so much for your support. I'm looking forward to your comments on my story.